Name something that gets passed around.
A joint.
A joint.
Legalized marijuana is always a very difficult question.
The time is long overdue for us to remove the federal prohibition on marijuana.
From now on, I smoke weed exclusively with white people.
Well, I'm getting high next time.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man, the Snoopy Poop Dog.
There's definitely cannabis in there, and it makes sure that I can sleep now.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
Don't piss off your old dealer.
Marijuana is not the kind of thing that ought to be legalized.
I know you're not supposed to admit that you smoke pot, but I don't drink alcohol.
Let's get out of here. I had some really good weed back at the hotel.
I used to smoke marijuana.
I don't care if an adult wants to smoke marijuana. They shouldn't go to prison for it either.
Welcome back, everybody. Time for Toker Talk Radio. So glad to have you here. Those of you listening, you don't get to see my awesome jacket that I'm wearing. I call this my game show host jacket. Like, I feel like I ought to have one of them really long, thin microphones, you know, like Gene Rayburn used to have on Match Game 74. It would go perfect with his jacket. Oh, my gosh. What a day, folks. Oh, my. I began the day with all of this talk about Sessions, our Attorney General, getting caught up in a lie. Yeah, he lied to Senator Al Franken about not having any contact with the Russians while he was campaigning for Trump. Now it's turning out that he had two different contacts with the Russians, and we're starting to hear more about some national security advisors to Donald Trump having some contact with the Russians. We're going to cover this more in depth in the rest of this hour. I've got plenty more audio, highlights from Jeff Sessions' press conference earlier today, comments from the president, the House Democratic leader, the Senate Democratic leader, the Speaker of the House, and the Republican who heads the House Review Committee that would look into these charges. We'll get to all of that coming up after this segment. But in this segment, just real quick, I wanted to talk about an amazing documentary. Oh, my God. So if you were watching the Oscars, you knew that ESPN's documentary, OJ, Made in America, won the Oscar. And I just got onto On Demand and binge-watched this over the past couple of days. And each episode's like an hour and 40 minutes long, right? It's like 100 minutes each episode, 500 minutes worth of documentary. It's a long documentary, folks. And the reason why it's so long is it did an amazing job of putting the O.J. Simpson case, and not just his murder case, but also his sports memorabilia theft case, also his domestic abuse cases, and his entire football and movie and television career, like his whole life. And they put it into this great context of race relations, of the Rodney King beating, of the Los Angeles Police Department being racist in their law enforcement. It even touches on the issues that we're still talking about today with police reform, with Black Lives Matter. It's phenomenal. It's just amazing, this documentary. Now, I will warn you, if you're going to watch this documentary and you're a little squeamish about crime scene photos, you might want to turn your head a couple times in episode 4, because they showed with excruciating detail the crime scene photos of Rockingham, where Nicole Brown was nearly decapitated and where Ron Goldman was stabbed and sliced to death by O.J. Simpson. And it was, just totally gruesome. And it's interesting because, of course, I lived through this. And a lot of my listeners, we're older, and we lived through this as well. We lived through Rodney King. We lived through the riots that happened after that. We lived through the O.J. verdict and the shock in America over that verdict. But with some distance and with the background and the conversations, they spoke with, Marcia Clark, and they spoke with Gil Garcetti, the district attorney, and they spoke with the attorneys on the other side. It's a fascinating look at criminal defense and some of the shenanigans that get pulled. Let me give you one example just from the documentary, right? Because this show, I mean, we're really about the criminal justice system a lot on this show, but this just floored me because I didn't know this about the OJ case, right? In the OJ case, they wanted to take the jurors to the crime scene, to the Rockingham house, right? Now, that makes sense. So Lance Ito, the judge, they get all the jurors on the bus. They take them out to Rockingham, and they show them, here's the walkway, and here's the stairs where she was killed and all that, right? That's all perfectly relevant, right? It makes total sense. You know, let's take the jurors, let them see where the crime scene was, right? But then the defense insisted on the jurors being able to see inside OJ's home, OJ and Nicole's home, okay? And OJ, part of what this documentary tells you, it kind of shows you that OJ never really considered himself black. Like, his whole world was white. His whole world was hanging out with white folks and being accepted in white culture and being a celebrity that got him a pass in the white world, right? So before they went to his house, his defense, Johnny Cochran and all those guys, went to the house, took down a lot of the pictures of the white people and put up pictures of OJ with black people so that the majority black jury would see and think that he was some sort of champion of civil rights and black culture when he was anything but. That's some dirty pool.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
We're Everclear, just your average band of losers and one-hit wonders. You know, when I was a kid, it was always assumed that drugs were cool. I'd do any drug on the table. It didn't matter what it was. Man, I was wrong. Never talk about the damage it's going to do to you physically and mentally. It takes your life away from you. I threw away 14 years of my life. Sad. I used to be a stupid rock and roll cliche. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to anybody. Figure it out for yourself. I don't know what else to say.
This has been the Russ Belville Show's anti-drug public service announcement of the day, exclusively on RadicalRuss.com.
When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The law office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Visit her website, fireduplawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer. Or email fireduplawyer@gmail.com.
Get the latest updates on the Russ Belville Show by following Radical Russ on Twitter and liking the Russ Belville Show on Facebook.
Tokers, there's no good reason to get your dog stoned. While it might not harm them physically, imagine being a dog who already begs for treats all day, and then imagine that dog having the munchies. Not cool.
And blue blasten Gergen, Pfaffen der Blasten, Schnurb Norben. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation, only on CannabisRadio.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's 9 after the hour, and we're going to take an extended look at Attorney General Jeff Sessions and his comments to Senator Al Franken during his Senate confirmation hearings. This has blown up the political world with allegations that Senator Sessions lied about not having contact with Russia during his work for the Trump campaign. Let's listen to the audio in questions. This is Senator Franken questioning Jeff Sessions.
And if there is any evidence that anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign communicated with the Russian government in the course of this campaign, what will you do?
Senator Franken, I'm not aware of any of those activities. I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I did not have communications with the Russians, and I'm unable to comment on it.
I have been called a surrogate for that campaign, and I did not have any contacts with the Russians. And of course, it came out today that he indeed had 2 different contacts with the Russians, including a contact with the Russian ambassador. Of course, Sessions in his press conference today said, they were just talking about church.
But I do remember saying I'd gone to Russia with a church group in 1991, and he said he was not a believer himself, but he was glad to have church people come there.
So, yeah, just talk about church. It had nothing to do with anything else. Of course not. No. Now, of course, when Loretta Lynch was talking to Bill Clinton on the plane in Phoenix, that, of course, required a special prosecutor. Sessions signed on to a letter saying there ought to be a special prosecutor to investigate this meeting between Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch while the Department of Justice is investigating Hillary's email server. Do as I say, not as I do, apparently. So all this morning, the political establishment reacted to this. I've got a few clips on this. First, the White House press corps, in the press briefing with Sean Spicer today, asked about this revelation, this lie that Sessions told under oath in the Senate. And according to Sean Spicer, it's a non-issue.
And you now categorically deny there were no contacts between the Russians and
I
anybody
can't
on the
deny.
campaign?
I guess my question is, I'm not right.
That's what the investigation would look at.
Right, and I guess my point is that you've had the intelligence community look at Russia's involvement in the election. You've had the House and the Senate both do the same. And so what I'm trying to ascertain is at what point, how many people have to say that there's nothing there before you realize there's nothing there?
How many people have to say there's nothing there before you recognize that there's nothing there? Because it's just a nothing story, right?
You keep asking, and I say you collectively, to try to find something that seemingly at least the reporting that I'm seeing in different organizations suggests that there's nothing new that's being reported. It's the same stuff over and over again that we've heard for literally 6 months. And so the question becomes at some point, what do you need to further investigate if there is nothing that has come out?
See, we have had all these allegations, and then we haven't had an investigation of them. And now there's more allegations come out that are the same allegations. So we shouldn't investigate because it's the same allegations that we haven't yet investigated. We haven't investigated, so there's no point in having an investigation because without this investigation, we haven't heard anything new. So what's the point of investigating?
So at some point, you do have to ask yourself, what are you actually looking for? How many times do you have to come to the same conclusion before you take the answer?
So there's nothing there. The House has investigated it, and there's nothing there. The Senate's investigated it, and there's nothing there. How many times do we have to have investigations that tell us there's nothing there before we get the hint that there's nothing there? Well, based on the Benghazi standard, I'd say 11 times. Can you believe this frickin' hypocrisy from the Republicans who held 11 different investigations over the Benghazi incident, 11 separate times, hours-long investigations where they heard the same thing over and over and over and nothing new came out, and yet they'd still hold another investigation and another investigation and another investigation and again found nothing.
So at some point you do have to ask yourself, what are you actually looking for? How many times do you have to come to the same conclusion before you take the answer?
Very good point, Sean Spicer. So the rest of the political establishment has been reacting to this. First of all, Donald Trump today, the president, was in a ship. He was doing some tour at some Navy thing. And as he was wandering through with the press, they were shouting questions at him. And this is what, let's see if we can find the Donald Trump comments earlier today. Where did I put those? Oh, yes. So this is Donald Trump being asked whether or not Attorney General Sessions should recuse himself if there's any investigation into this tie between the Trump campaign and Russia. Should Attorney General Sessions recuse himself?
Mr. President, should Sessions recuse himself from investigations into your campaign in Russia?
I don't think so at all.
When did you first learn that Sessions spoke to the Russian ambassador? Did you know during the campaign? When were you aware that he spoke to the Russian ambassador?
I wasn't aware of it.
When did you find out?
He should have spoken truthfully about whether he spoke with the ambassador.
I think he probably did.
Trump says he probably did speak honestly, that this is the first he's ever heard of someone speaking to the Russian ambassador, and that he shouldn't recuse himself. That Sessions should not recuse himself based on lying to the Senate about this, and based on having had conversations with the Russians while he was a surrogate, while he was trying to help Donald Trump get elected. Now, others have been asked about this. Paul Ryan, the Republican Speaker of the House, the third most powerful Republican in the nation, doesn't think there's any need for Sessions to recuse himself.
Should he recuse himself? I think he answered that question this morning, which is if he himself is the subject of an investigation, of course he would. But if he's not, I don't see any purpose or reason to doing this.
So if there's an investigation into whether or not the Russians colluded with the Trump campaign, so long as the investigation isn't on Sessions himself, Paul Ryan thinks it's fine for Sessions to head the investigation. Sure, Jeff Sessions will be perfectly fair to Donald Trump. No chance he'd sweep anything under the rug. Exactly. What else? Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan also says this is much ado about nothing. Trump isn't involved.
We know that Russia tried to meddle in the election. Why do we know this? Because we in Congress and the intelligence community did an investigation after the election which discovered Russia was trying to meddle in the election. This is something we all well know. Here's another thing. We have seen no evidence from any of these ongoing investigations that anybody in the Trump campaign or the Trump team was involved in any of this.
No evidence other than, of course, what just came out today, that Sessions was talking with the Russian ambassador. And we've also had the discussions about Michael Flynn, his former national security advisor, talking with the Russians. And now there's word of another national security advisor who has been talking to the Russians. Now, if this comes down to investigation, the person who'd have to be beginning this would be Jason Chaffetz, the Republican from Utah. Here's what Jason Chaffetz had to say about Sessions' comments.
I do think he needs to clarify, and I do think he should recuse himself. Absolutely.
Can you explain your call for this?
Look, based on what we've read, and the information is not complete, I think the Attorney General should further clarify, and I do think he's going to need to recuse himself at this point.
So finally, we get some Republican in a position of power to do something about this, calling for Sessions to recuse himself from any investigations. Now, that comes on the heels of last Friday, Darrell Issa, the Republican from California, on Bill Maher's show, calling for a special prosecutor and calling for Attorney General Sessions to recuse himself. And that is exactly what Sessions did today.
I have now decided to recuse myself from any existing or future investigations of any matter relating in any way to the campaigns for President of the United States.
All right, so he's going to completely recuse himself. This is the first step. And this indicates that they know something really bad is going on here. Now, as to why Donald Trump, the president, would say that Sessions doesn't need to recuse himself, and why Sean Spicer, the press secretary, would say he doesn't need to recuse himself, and why Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, says he doesn't need to recuse himself. Well, this is what Jeff Sessions had to say when asked about that at the press conference today.
White House press secretary and the president himself both said today that they think you should not recuse yourself from these investigations. Did you do that?
I did share with White House counsel, on my staff has, that I intend to recuse myself this afternoon. But I feel like, because they don't know the rules, the ethics rules. Most people don't. But when you evaluate the rules, I feel like that I am I should not be involved investigating a campaign I had a role in.
Well, that's awfully refreshing.
You don't scare me. I got chunks of guys like you in my stool.
Well, it's 420, everybody. I got to say, though, what scares me about what Jeff Sessions just said is that the president doesn't know the ethics rules. How could he have known that Sessions should recuse himself? Hell, I haven't read the House ethics rules either. I haven't read the national ethics rules either, but it seems pretty cut and dried that when there's an investigation on your boss, you shouldn't be the one in charge of it. New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
People will smoke marijuana in pot stores right next to schools, daycare centers, and churches.
Okay, well, maybe you're high, too.
This is Cannabis Facts from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org, supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. In 1937, the second most prescribed medicine, marijuana, was banned. It wasn't about marijuana. The paper, oil, and chemical industries lobbied to end hemp farming. No longer labor-intensive, an acre of hemp produced more quality paper than 4 acres of trees. Plastics and fibers could be produced from a plant. Hemp can even produce 10 times the energy of today's ethanol. As marijuana prohibition ends, many states now allow farmers to again grow hemp. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to process America's hemp crop at hempinc.com.
Yarr! Thar be pirates here! Har, 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 har. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Sorry for the delay. Just getting some more updates taken care of. Quick update on what I just told you about about O.J. Simpson. Yeah, we have an O.J. Simpson update. Cracked. I don't know if you read Cracked, but the tweet came across from Cracked, and I read them quite a bit. According to this tweet, O.J. Simpson is expected to be released from prison in July. A parole board hearing is predicted to rule in favor of releasing him on good behavior. Once out of prison, Simpson will have access to a $2.67 million NFL pension. He will have served less than a third of his sentence. There you go. OJ out after 11 years of a 33-year sentence. Okay, so let's get back to the discussion here on Jeff Sessions, because as we've been talking, Jeff Sessions committed perjury when he spoke to Al Franken, Senator Al Franken, and made this pronouncement during his confirmation hearing.
And if there is any evidence that anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign communicated with the Russian government in the course of this campaign, what will you do?
Senator Franken, I'm not aware of any of those activities. I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I did not have communications with the Russians, and I'm unable to comment on it.
I've been called a surrogate with that campaign, and I did not have any contact with the Russians. Oh, except for the ambassador, the Russian freaking ambassador. Now, Sessions is trying desperately to portray this as if he's doing the right thing by recusing himself. He said, I'll recuse myself from any investigations. But folks, recusal is not enough. This is a guy who got caught committing perjury. This is our nation's top law enforcement official lying to the Senate. I tend to think that's a big deal, lying to the Senate. And so did Jeff Sessions when it was Bill Clinton lying about a blowjob.
I am concerned about a president under oath being alleged to have committed perjury. I hope that he can rebut that and prove that did not happen. I hope he can show he did not commit obstruction of justice and that he can complete his term. But there are serious allegations that occurred. And in America, and the Supreme Court and the American people believe no one is above the law.
No one is above the law. And of course, perjury, in order to prove perjury, you have to show that a person under oath willfully subscribes any material matter which he does not believe to be true. Even if someone says something false to Congress, investigators have to prove they knew at the time they were doing so. And that's why you're getting this quote from Sessions today in his press conference trying to do just that.
My reply to the question of Senator Franken was honest and correct as I understood it at the time.
As he understood it at the time. So he's already trying to lay the defense that he didn't knowingly perjure himself. That he was confused. He's a confused old man, just didn't understand the question, I guess. Now, this is something that he had a big problem with again under Bill Clinton, saying quote, this was after Clinton was acquitted by the Senate in February of 1999. Sessions had voted to convict him, and he was worried that if we don't convict Bill Clinton for lying about a blowjob under oath, it would damage the country. He said, quote, "It is crucial to our system of justice that we demand the truth. I fear that an acquittal of this president will weaken the legal system by providing an option for those who consider being less than truthful in court." Yeah, seems that it has, hasn't it? You were a little less than truthful in the Senate. Sessions at the time said it was proven beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty that Clinton committed perjury and that the chief law enforcement officer of the land, whose oath of office calls on him to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, should then prosecute. Now, Sessions say there's nothing misleading. This is a spokeswoman for for Attorney General Sessions today. Said there's, quote, absolutely nothing misleading about his answer, end quote, because he was discussing contacts between Russia and the Trump campaign, not about meetings Sessions had in his role as senator. Oh, okay. So this is how this works, right? When Jeff Sessions wants to talk to Russians, he's Senator Sessions. And when he wants to talk to other people, he's a Trump campaign surrogate. He can just switch hats, apparently, and then there's nothing wrong with it, right? Do you think either one of us would get away with that type of excuse? He's also trying to lay the foundation that, yeah, I had some contact with the guy, but we didn't discuss anything about the campaign.
And somehow the subject of the Ukraine came up. I had the Ukrainian ambassador in my office the day before, and to listen to him, nothing that Russia had done nothing that was wrong in any area, and everybody else was wrong with regard to the Ukraine.
Now, that's disturbing, folks. First of all, the question isn't whether or not you talked about the campaign to the Russians. The question was, did you have contacts with the Russians? And he said no. The question was not, did you have contacts with the Russians as a senator? Or did you have contacts with the Russians to discuss the Trump campaign? It was, did you have contacts with the Russians? And he did. But this answer he gives about how he had also spoken to the Ukrainian ambassador also peels back another layer of what's going on in this story. Understand all of the background on this, that Vladimir Putin has numerous ties, has a lot of investment in the Russian state oil company. Okay, their nationalized oil company. He's a billionaire, and he's got about a $19 billion thing going on with this Russian oil company. This Russian oil company found some new deposits, and they want to get the oil from these deposits down to the ocean where it can be shipped out. And it just so happens to get to the sea, the port they want to get to is in Ukraine. And so that had a lot to do with Putin annexing Crimea so that he could secure the routes for this oil to make its way to the ocean. That's what that whole Crimean thing was. It's basically an aggressive move to protect an oil company's profits, you know, like most modern wars. So the other tie to this is Trump being in league with Russia, visiting with them in 2015, and allegations that there's some sweetheart deal involved here. Because when Putin annexed Crimea, the Obama administration levied sanctions on Russia to thwart them from taking advantage of this whole oil field deal to ship through Ukraine. Flynn, the former national security advisor who's now resigned, was involved in discussions with those Russians, telling them, don't worry about these sanctions, don't respond, don't react to Obama's sanctions, because once we get elected, we're going to pull those sanctions for you. Well, then that starts to lead into the Russians wanting Trump to get elected so he can follow through on that promise. And that's where all this Russian hacking stuff comes in, and discussions with the Russian ambassadors and all of that. This is a huge deal, folks. And the Republicans want nothing more than to sweep this under the rug, say it's no big deal, there's nothing there, nothing to look at, no show here, move along. Because they know as these layers start getting peeled back and all these connections start getting pointed out, this is going to be a bigger presidential political scandal than Watergate. This is the President of the United States and his staff colluding with Russia to win them election as a quid pro quo to make oil company profits for Vladimir Putin. This is big. This is really big. And reporters now, and this is one of the silver linings, I suppose, of Trumpistan, is that journalists are actually turning into journalists again and asking tough questions. They tried to pin him down on this. Did you ever talk to any other Russians, Jeff Sessions?
Have you met with any other Russian officials or folks connected to the Russian government since you endorsed Donald Trump?
I don't believe so. We meet a lot of people, so.
I don't believe so, but, we meet a lot of people. How much more Weasley can you get than that? If you ask me, Russ Belville, have you met any Russians lately? I can say pretty damn definitively that in the past year, I have not met a single Russian. Now, that may not be true. I may have met someone at a cannabis cup somewhere who, unbeknownst to me, was Russian. But you know what I'm saying? It's like if someone asked me, have you met any Russians today? It wouldn't be, well, gosh, I have no idea. I meet so many people. No, it'd be a yes or no. I could tell you whether or not I met a Russian. This is more weasel words from a guy who knows these kind of clips are going to be played back in court someday, and he doesn't want to get nailed down to saying that he never met anybody. So the leaders in the other parties had a lot to say to this. Nancy Pelosi thinks that Sessions shouldn't just recuse himself.
The fact that the Attorney General, the top cop in our country, lied under oath to the American people is grounds for him to resign.
Exactly. If the Attorney General lies under oath in the Senate, it's not a question of recusal. It's a question of resignation. And Pelosi also wants to know, why is it the party of Reagan, the Saint Ronald Reagan, who single-handedly destroyed the evil empire that was Russia and the Soviet Union, why are they so suddenly in love with Vladimir Putin?
I don't know what problem the Republicans have with the truth. They don't want to know the truth about the Russian connection, which are about hacking and undermining our democratic system. We should have that even if Hillary Clinton had won the White House.
And on the Senate side, the leader of the Senate Democrats, Chuck Schumer, is also calling for Sessions to resign.
Look, the Attorney General is the chief law enforcement officer of the land, and already his integrity and independence has been questioned. It would be better for the country if he'd resign. There's nothing inappropriate with the senator meeting with the Russian ambassador. There is something very inappropriate to dramatically mislead Congress. He said he didn't remember afterwards, but it was in the record for weeks afterwards, and you can be sure he was thoroughly briefed for this hearing. It was obvious, with everything that was swirling about, that this question would come up. It's not a question of you wonder about, I didn't remember.
Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
Americans are sick and tired of the cost of the war on drugs.
You can find Radical Russ online everywhere.
It's time for Cannabis Facts about teen drug use from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A recent survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control indicates that in states that have legalized medical marijuana, the rate of marijuana consumption among high school students has not increased. In fact, in legal states like Colorado, teen use has actually decreased significantly. It's simply no longer a big deal for teenagers in legal states. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
I have a package here for Radical Rick. Is there a Radical Rick here? How about a Rick Russ? Any Rick Russ? Somebody named Freddie Barack has sent him a package. Anybody? What is that? Sounds like a skunk. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation, only on CannabisRadio.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We're talking about Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who told Senator Al Franken he never had any contact with the Russians during the Trump campaign. Turns out he did. Turns out that he was speaking to the Russian ambassador on a couple of occasions. So, of course, the Republicans are circling the wagons and saying that this is much ado about nothing. And the last thing we were talking about is how Sessions was trying to dismiss the importance of his meeting with the Russian ambassador as being no big deal. It's no big deal.
But I do remember saying I'd gone to Russia with a church group in 1991, and he said he was not a believer himself, but he was glad to have church people come there.
So, not a believer himself, but is glad to have church people there and basically being all nicey nice. They just had a little chit chat. It was really nothing important. I mean, gosh, can't a senator just go, have a talk with somebody and people don't make it out to be some big deal that it's not? I mean, why all this fuss? Why all this worry over it? Well, keep that in mind. Keep that thought in mind as we go back to this clip I'm going to play you a clip from CNN, and this was during the whole Hillary Clinton email fiasco where they were concerned that Bill Clinton had gotten on the plane to talk to Loretta Lynch, the attorney general at the time, who was supposedly investigating the whole email fiasco. This is Jeff Sessions speaking to CNN back in 2016 about that very issue.
Okay, let's talk about the calls for a special prosecutor to look into the Clinton Foundation. What exactly is the smoking gun that Donald Trump thinks warrants a special prosecutor?
Well, we've seen a whole host of things, but this
I mean, we've seen emails, but where's the there?
Well, the fundamental thing is you cannot be Secretary of State of the United States of America and use that position to extort or to seek contributions to your private foundation.
Yes.
Wait a minute. I mean, that is a fundamental violation of law, and that does appear to have happened
Where?
here.
Where has she extorted money?
Well, when people think that the way you gain entree is to give to this foundation, why are these people giving money to the foundation? Why are these people in countries that are very poor giving millions of dollars, even hundreds of millions of dollars, to a foundation that doesn't benefit them in any direct way or the people in their country? So they're doing it to gain access, and you cannot pay for access.
Of course.
Wait a minute. This last deal was that this prince asked in the regular order to get access to Hillary Clinton and meet with her. It was turned down. The foundation called and said, in effect, he's given $32 million, and they immediately got access.
But
that's wrong.
Other than a meeting, maybe that's a handshake, maybe that's a photo op, maybe that's a hello, how are you? Where is the evidence that some money was exchanged for a policy or for something that happened?
He asked for an investigation. The man wanted access to talk about something. This is very important to people, and they have an agenda. They wouldn't be asking for access for nothing, and they wouldn't be giving $30 million to a foundation that's not relevant to them. They wanted access, they got access, and I think that raises questions. I'm not saying that's a crime at this point, but I think there definitely raises questions.
Yeah, definitely raises some questions when somebody goes and has a meeting with someone that's really important and there's some sort of scandal or controversy going on at the same time involving those people. Yeah, that's your Attorney General, then Senator Jeff Sessions, talking about how we so desperately needed to put together a special prosecutor on the Clinton Foundation. Got to have a special prosecutor. There's an appearance of impropriety, and these people don't ask for these conversations and this access without an agenda. Why they've got an agenda. They're trying to get something passed. They're trying to get some sort of favor. They're trying to get some sort of access. Unless, of course, it's the Russian ambassador talking to Jeff Sessions.
But I do remember saying I'd gone to Russia with a church group in 1991, and he said he was not a believer himself, but he was glad to have church people come there. I did not respond by referring to the two meetings, one very brief after a speech, and one with two of my senior staffers, professional staffers, with the Russian ambassador in Washington.
And, of course, those meetings with the staffers and the Russian ambassador, why? We shouldn't make anything out of that. That had nothing to do with wanting to try to get Donald Trump elected or hacking into the Democrats or any deals with Crimea and the oil and Putin and all of that. Why? They just had chit-chat. It was just some talks about church groups and Ukraine and gee, how's your puppy dog doing? And, gosh, some weather we're having here, isn't it? Now, the journalists there at the press conference this afternoon pushed back a bit. They pushed back and wanted to nail him down on what he should have done.
Answer Senator Franken's question. Were you just not thinking of the meeting with the Russian ambassador, or did you not consider it relevant?
I was taken aback a little bit about this brand new information, this allegation that surrogates, and I had been called a surrogate for Donald Trump, had been meeting continuously with Russian officials, and that's what it struck me very hard, and that's what I focused my answer on. And in retrospect, if I should have slowed down and said, but I did meet one Russian official a couple of times. That would be the ambassador. Thank you all. Take care.
So now the question is, what happens? The Republicans would have to convene any sort of special prosecutor, any sort of investigation on this. With Sessions saying he'll recuse himself, the Republicans are going to want to move forward with this as some sort of House Intelligence Committee investigation, maybe a joint House-Senate committee, a special select committee. But you can bet they're going to do everything they can to keep this investigation chaired by and run by Republicans. That's what they're going to go for. That's what they're angling for right now is, we got caught with our hand in the cookie jar. We'll apologize. We'll recuse ourselves, but we certainly won't let go of the power to keep control of this investigation. Democrats, on the other hand, need to push for special prosecutor. They need to push for Sessions to resign. Folks, he ain't going to resign. I can tell you that right now. I don't think this guy is going to resign unless we get some more damning evidence coming out. This is the kind of thing where Republicans are going to think, circle the wagons, deflect and deny, obfuscate the issue, and in a few days, it'll all blow over. People will lose sight of what's going on. They'll lose their interest, and it'll be no big deal. So it's incumbent upon us to keep this on the front burner, because one of two things can happen here. Either Sessions, and here's the weird thing that I'm thinking. This is just coming to me over the past couple hours. Maybe we don't want Sessions to resign. Maybe we want to keep Jeff Sessions. Because consider some of the alternatives. Consider an Attorney General Chris Christie, or Attorney General Rudy Giuliani, or Attorney General Pam Bondi. There's a whole bunch of people that could be selected for that Attorney General position that would be just as bad as Sessions, or maybe even worse than Jeff Sessions. But a Jeff Sessions who doesn't resign is going to be hounded by this Russia thing. He's going to be on constant guard. He's going to be under investigation. He's going to be under suspicion for his entire tenure. That guy, under attack, might not have the time or inclination to get serious about attacking recreational marijuana. Maybe having the Attorney General so tied up with a Russia scandal is actually a silver lining for the marijuana industry. By distracting him and the administration from going after marijuana. Maybe the Russia thing is going to just keep them so busy that we fly under the radar. Now, that, of course, is just the perspective if I'm going to take the absolute marijuana perspective. If I'm looking at this from the American perspective, from the proud American perspective that I am, as someone who took an oath at age 17 to preserve, protect, and defend this Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I take it seriously, from that perspective, Sessions got to go. Whether we get Chris Christie or Pam Bondi or whoever else gets in that position, Sessions has got to go. But hell, Trump and Pence have got to go. This whole administration is illegitimate. And I love the defense from the Republicans. Well, the Russian hacking, the Russian meddling didn't affect the election. Hillary blew it. She didn't campaign in Michigan and Pennsylvania. She stole the election from Bernie Sanders. She had a private email server and FBI breathing down her neck. She made all these mistakes. The Russians didn't affect the election. Well, that doesn't matter whether they affected the election. Just like deflated footballs in the AFC Championship game didn't cost the Indianapolis Colts that game. They were beaten by the Patriots 48-14 or something like that. Some big blowout. You couldn't blame the loss on deflated footballs. But the question isn't whether or not the deflated footballs affected the game. The question is whether or not someone deflated the footballs in contravention of the rules. If someone deflated the footballs in order to cheat or gain an unfair advantage. Similarly, whether or not the Russian email hacking and the Russian interference in the election made a difference is irrelevant. It's that cheating was attempted that makes the difference. It's not whether or not they were successful, it's their intent. It's the cheating itself that's the problem, whether or not the cheating succeeded. When the teacher catches you cheating, it doesn't matter whether or not you got an A on the test or you managed to mess up your cheating and still get an F. It's the fact that you cheated. That's the problem. But Republicans can't abide that right at the moment, because then they'd have to admit that, yeah, this is an illegitimate president. This election is suspect. This administration will have an asterisk next to it in the annals of history. And this is something that permeates this entire story. The notion of fair play, the notion of our elections being something that we can trust. Our elections for decades have been the envy of the world in our transparency, in their honesty. Despite our gerrymandering, despite our voter suppression efforts, compared to a lot of places in the world, we are a beacon of democracy, but not if we allow this Russian interference to go unpunished. We're going to take a break. Going to close things off with Jeff Sessions and his tobacco history and some more Trump evil when it comes to the Dreamers.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
The Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit MJBA.net for more details.
You're not high? You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period.
All right, maybe you're high, too. Warning. Hit taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they pay me to say that.
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like your opinion, man.
A public service message from the Russ Belville Show. Remember, friends, there's more to life than marijuana. I just can't remember what it is. Why'd I come in here? This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Just closing up shop here today. And a reminder, tomorrow is my 900th show. That's right, 900 independent Russ Belville shows. And that's on the heels of my production of 908 normal podcasts. So tomorrow will be show number, if you add them all up. Oh, wait, and I also had a bunch of shows I did for XM Satellite. Let me count how many of those are. I think I did 69 shows for XM. Let me check my hard drive here. Pretty sure it was 69 shows. Sounds familiar. So, yeah, 900 shows tomorrow will be my 900th show, and then we've got 908 shows that I did for normal. And here we go. We did, 89. I did 89 shows for XM. So this will be 1,800. Let's see, what's 89 and 8 is 97. Yeah, 1,897 shows as of tomorrow. That means my 1,900th total show sometime next week on Wednesday. Wow. Who knew you could talk about marijuana for at least an hour a day 5 days a week for 2008, 9 years. Almost 9 years I've been doing this. Unbelievable. What an amazing change we've had in these 9 years, too. Real quick, let me get some other bits out on Jeff Sessions. Jacob Sullum writes in Chicago Sun-Times a very important point that Sessions, a former Alabama senator, also claims to believe in federalism. After the death of William Rehnquist in 2005, Sessions gave a floor speech in which he praised the Chief Justice for, quote, reestablishing a respect for state law and state sovereignty, end quote. Sessions noted that the federal government, under its authority to regulate interstate commerce, quote, has broad power, but there are limits to the reach of the Commerce Clause, end quote. But not when it comes to marijuana. Sessions, of course, said, quote, it does remain a violation of federal law to distribute marijuana throughout any place in the United States, whether a state legalizes it or not, end quote. And the piece by Sullum is called Marijuana is Where Federalist Principles Go to Die. That's right. You can always count on a Republican to be states' rights until you start talking about that states' right to legalize marijuana. And another thing, you remember that quote that we got from Jeff Sessions where he's worried about the proliferation of marijuana across this country? It would be a big problem.
I'm not sure we're going to be a better, healthier nation that if we have marijuana being sold at every corner grocery store.
So we don't want marijuana at every corner grocery store, but Sessions was never shy about allowing cigarettes at every corner grocery store. Back in the 90s and 2000s, he was all about the tobacco industry. During his 96-97 campaign, he got so much money from R.J. Reynolds, he had to send some of it back because they had exceeded the federal maximum. During the 90s, when we were suing the tobacco industry over their lying about the health effects of their products, he called that extortion. He said, quote, if we let them get by with this extortion of the tobacco industry, then they'll start shaking down other industries one after the other. So he's got a problem with that. He's also had a problem with all the master settlement agreement. He introduced a pro-tobacco industry amendment in 97 that would cap how much money lawyers could make from suing the tobacco companies. Now, that amendment was defeated. And as late as 2004, Jeff Sessions was still opposed to the FDA regulating tobacco. 2004, folks. He was still, the 98 was the tobacco settlement agreement. 6 years later, he's still against FDA regulation of tobacco. And it didn't get regulation until 2009. Yeah, the FDA couldn't regulate tobacco until 2009. And when the Senate passed this compromise bill in 2004, he used this comment to fight against it. He said, one bad bill that couldn't pass on its own attached to another bad bill that can't be passed on its own, and used everything from free speech arguments to pro-business language to try to defend the cigarette companies to keep them free from FDA regulation. So that's your Jeff Sessions. Tough on weed, but he's fine with the tobacco. And finally, in one last little bit of Donald Trump evil, tell you the story of Daniela Vargas. She was in Jackson, Mississippi 2 weeks ago when immigration officials handcuffed her father in the family driveway. The Immigration's Custom Informant, ICE, detained her father and brother so they could deport her father. She hid in the closet. Now, this 22-year-old yesterday came out to a news conference to speak out against this. She's one of the dreamers who twice had filled out the paperwork to remain in this country as a dreamer. After she spoke at the press conference and left in her car, 2 ICE agents pulled her over and told her, quote, you know who we are and you know why we're here. And then they handcuffed her and took her into custody. So now people that want to speak out against these policies have to fear they're going to be arrested for doing so. That's all the time we got for today, folks. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you for show 900 tomorrow. And until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.
The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.